Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to go over the text-dependent analysis publication rubric. You'll see right now that I'm currently on the second and third 9 weeks writing journal and local writing workspace. You can find and access the rubric in this grading section. It's a purple box, and you click on it, it will open up and look like this. I'm just going to briefly review each of the areas from this rubric with you. It's important to understand that this is graded holistically, which means as I go through and check your papers, I'm looking at each of these bulleted items, and the area where your paper falls in most is the area that you will be graded on, and that's the score you'll receive. You would receive potentially a full credit, 100%, or a 92 if it's in this category, an 84 if it ranges in this category, and a 74 if it ranges in this category. I want to first briefly talk about the number of bulleted items that tie into analysis, pure, unadulterated analysis. That means analysis must be depthy, both implicit and explicit. So let's look at the number of bullets that tie into analysis. Bullet 1, analytic understanding, in-depth analytic understanding. We have bullet 1 being strong analysis, thorough analysis, implicit and explicit in bullet 4. We have in bullet 5 and 6, it also mentions text evidence tying in with your analysis. So we have 4 of the 9 bulleted items strictly for your ability to be a strong analyzer, both using evidence as well as that implicit and explicit analysis. That's almost half of the bulleted items. So we are at 4 of 9 items strictly determined by your strength of your body paragraphs. So it's something to keep in mind and be aware of. The first bullet says it addresses all parts of the task, demonstrating an in-depth analytical understanding of the text. That is referring, the task is the prompt. That's why you have the prompt at the top and in the box, and you need to make sure that your response, your essay, connects to the entire prompt. Both bold-faced areas of that prompt must be fully addressed. We don't just talk about each separate, we interact them. They should be connected to each other, and we should see that trend of analyzing and finding strong evidence and connecting to the entire task of the prompt. That is both parts or both bold-faced items from that prompt. So I would suggest if you're not sure that you understand what your prompt is, you probably shouldn't be using that for your analysis selection. You need to understand the prompt so that you're responding to the prompt appropriately and with a lot of depth and detail. Because if it's off task, in other words, off prompt, it doesn't matter how beautiful a piece of writing it is, it's going to get a 74 because it's off task. The next bulleted item says to have an effective introduction, development, which is your body, and conclusion, identifying an opinion, topic, or controlling idea related to the text. This is in regards to our text structure. This means that we can see clear paragraph breaks, not just one lumped item. I should see your intro, I should see your body paragraphs, I should see your conclusion. It also means we see that thesis statement in the introduction. We see your claims that are a little more specific, but they lead in each of your body paragraphs. And then we see that thesis statement restated in the conclusion. That is keeping your paper centered around one whole controlling idea. That controlling idea being your thesis statement as a specific answer to addressing the task of the prompt. Bullet number 3, a strong organizational structure that effectively supports and focuses ideas. In other words, you figured out and developed an organization in your body paragraphs that makes sense. You haven't separated the two skills. You're making those skills interact with each other, and you're doing a good job of going through each aspect, intro, body, and conclusion. So as we just looked at, 4 of these bold-faced items of the 9 are for analysis. And now we have 2, so now that's 2 of the 9 are for your organization, thesis statement, claim statements, and paragraphing structure. That's huge. The next bullet here, which we already discussed, is on analysis. We're going to read through thoroughly. It says, thorough analysis of explicit and implicit meanings from the text to effectively support claims, opinions, ideas, and inferences. That's that below the evidence. Are you going into a lot of detail? Are you saying what you notice explicitly? Well, the evidence says this. When the evidence says this little detail, and when you mention that, you're being explicit. And then are you connecting it back to that creative idea that came from your brain, your background knowledge, that implicit thing you notice that connects to the task of the prompt? You need to do that thoroughly. One sentence analysis statements below that evidence are going to give you a 74 on this rubric for that area. It should be clear. It should be analysis. It shouldn't just restate the claim. It shouldn't summarize the evidence. We are being explicit and implicit in our analysis as we connect our evidence to our claims, as we connect our evidence to our thesis statement. What is that connection that you noticed? Analyze, don't summarize. Analyze, don't repeat your thesis. You need to analyze your evidence explicitly and implicitly. That's going to be the most challenging one, I think, for all of us when it comes to making sure that we've done it well and we've done it correctly and that we're actually analyzing in our body paragraphs and not summarizing. The following bullet says to make substantial, accurate, and direct references to the text using relevant key details, examples, quotes, facts, and definitions. This is our text evidence. This is the cited evidence that we have within each and every body paragraph. If you have a body paragraph, it needs to have your cited evidence. But that also means the accurate, substantial references doesn't necessarily mean that we should have a quote that's a billion words long. Too much quoting is going to make for weak analysis. So we need to make sure that our quotes are of a good length, but they're not overly taking over our body paragraphs. What should take over our body paragraphs is our thorough analysis that is connecting our quote to our claim. So make sure you don't overquote, but also this is telling us to make sure we don't underquote either. The next bulleted item says substantial reference to the main idea and relevant details to support the writer's purpose. That's, again, pure analysis. That's making those connections. That's saying what we notice between our evidence and how it connects to our thesis. We need to make sure that we're doing that multiple times. It says substantial reference to the main idea and details. That means we need multiple body paragraphs. That's referring to the idea that we have multiple claims that we analyze and that we're explaining for our thesis statement. If you try to submit an essay that has one body paragraph only, you will not get anything better than a C on this publication, because you're not having substantial references to the text. You're not even having, and down here it says sufficient references. That's not even sufficient. One body paragraph is not sufficient. So please make sure we have multiple body paragraphs that we are giving pieces of evidence for in each body, and then we're giving nice, in-depth, implicit and explicit analysis in each of those body paragraphs. The remaining 3 bullets are the ones that focus on our grammar, our style, and our conventions thing. Notice the difference between 100 and a 92 is the types of transition words used. Skillful use of transition versus appropriate use of transitions. What might that look like? Well, skillful uses of transitions transition between your paragraphs subtly, not just with those obvious, blatant, tacked-in words like first, last, in conclusion, finally. We would call those appropriate. We would never call those skillful. So make sure we're not using the tacked in transitions that sound so obvious every time. Have skillful transitions used. Think of a subtle way to join sentences together without always having to use that in-your-face loud transition word every single time. The next area is effective use of precise language and domain-specific vocabulary drawn from the text to explain the topic and or convey experiences and events. This is our style components, especially using expert vocabulary. If you're analyzing the theme and the mood, but in your body paragraphs, you don't clearly use the terminology theme and mood, and if that's what your prompt is connected to, Why aren't you? Why are you not using those expert terms as you connect your evidence to your claim and your analysis? We should see the terminology of reading used throughout the body paragraphs of this essay. It makes you look like that expert, excuse me. So you need to make sure that if you want to look and sound like an expert, use the language of reading class in your writing piece. Using all those terms that we talk about and all the learning targets effectively as well as logically, because it needs to connect to the prompt that you're given. If it doesn't, don't use the terms. But when you're doing them logically and effectively in your analysis, it's going to make your writing have a strong style. It's going to make you sound like an expert, and it's going to make you have a high quality essay. So check your word choice. Make sure that you're doing it in a way that it adds value and sort of the icing on the cake of your writing style. The last area is looking at those conventions, making sure that your sentences are not just all simple sentences. Use a quality of multiple types of sentences, both simple, compound, complex, compound, complex. Make sure that you're also following on grammar usage rules. Pronouns agree with their antecedents. Subjects agree with their verbs. All words are spelled correctly. Capitalization rules are followed. We don't have run-ons and fragments. We use punctuation appropriately and properly. And for goodness sakes, make sure we're checking where it says errors present do not interfere with the meaning. Make sure you're checking that I talked about this multiple times. There's a 2-letter flip-flop difference between the word quiet and quite, and it's the TE or the ET ending. That's not checked by spell check. And that word, if you mean quiet but you say quite, that changes the meaning of your sentence. So watch that. You need to watch all spelling within this. I would highly recommend, as you're going throughout this week and preparing your piece for publication, getting it to perfect, getting it to that 100 quality, I would highly, highly, highly also recommend that you share your document with one other student in this classroom for a peer edit experience. They can comment in your piece, they can check over it for these rubric items just like I do back and forth with you in class. Now keep in mind also that as you're doing that you're not inadvertently taking someone else's ideas and putting them into your paper. That's inappropriate. We don't want to copy and paste anything from the internet or anybody else's words. That's called plagiarism. And plagiarism will equal a 0 on publication, no questions asked. Likely, I might give a opportunity for a makeup, but that's after a strong conversation between me and you, me and Mr. Trashing you, me and your mom and dad and you, and then we go from there. It's an embarrassing experience, and I would hate for that to happen to anybody. So don't be taking even one sentence from somewhere else that someone else wrote and try to pass it off as your writing. That would include in the hook. Stay away from looking up these fancy little definitions of words to make your hook stronger. I want to see your words in these hooks. If I'm curious about it, I will Google it and I will find it and I will catch plagiarism. Make sure all words within this paper are yours, except obviously where you give your quotes to support you. But those quotes are properly quoted in the text with quotation marks around them. And that is you acknowledging and saying that this came from someone else and not me. So please be cautious of plagiarism. And as you are continuing this week, know that these are due at the end of the half day on Friday, or your paper will drop 1 letter grade per late. I highly recommend that you rewatch this video multiple times this week, and good luck. And go ahead and get to work on getting your pieces ready for publication. Remember, we are publishing and working in the publication submission section. No longer are we working in the journal. We're just working in the publication submission section.